any products that are helping to improve seller productivity, seller efficiency, and that sort of connectivity in this sort of now at a minimum hybrid world, in the most case virtual world. Those are things that are going to stay.
Thanks for tuning in to Go to Market Excellence. This is Dan Quirk, host of the show. My guest today is Toby Carrington. Toby Carrington is the Executive Vice President of Global Operations at Seismic, the global leader in sales enablement. Toby is responsible for both ops and enablement at Seismic, and previously to that, he held a number of senior leadership roles in operations and finance at Siemens, and he's managed global and regional teams around the world in Singapore, Australia, and Germany. So we're talking about our highly experienced global ops leader. Toby, thanks so much for joining the show today.
My pleasure, Dan. Nice to be with you.
And we're glad to have you. So when we first met, you told me this crazy story about how you held your first in-person sales kickoff with Seismic literally just days before the stay-at-home orders in February 2020. So, and then obviously you guys were forced to shift to remote learning shortly after that first sales kickoff that was in person. So share with us how the timing of all that ultimately contributed to huge growth for Seismic, and then even your recent acquisition of Lessonly in August of 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was certainly an interesting time. I mean, 2020 and even 2021 has been interesting for a lot of people. But I joined Seismic in late 2019, and one of the biggest things was kicking off our financial year, and so forth. And we literally had our sales kickoff, a week before everything really started shutting down. And the biggest challenge with that is we were rolling out a brand new sales process, new sales methodology, a whole bunch of new tools and everything like that. And we had the classical setup planned where we wanted to, have a series of follow-up training. My enablement team was going to fly around to different locations in the country, also into Europe and so forth, do classical classroom training. Mm-hmm. We had, of course, had some elements of hybrid training that we were planning on doing, also online and so forth. But there was a large part of it that was going to be around, our entire new sales process and sales methodology. And we had to pivot to, complete remote learning for that. So, we were all adapting to a new way of working in general, but it was really interesting because we had really critical time to roll out a whole series of brand new initiatives across the board.
Wow! And so you do all this work, and then you present it in person, and then you guys all go remote. So what was the moment? How long after you went remote did you realize, hey, we need some kind of like software to help us do this remote learning thing?
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, we were doing certain things remote before, but it wasn't it wasn't complete. It wasn't easy to create the content for things like that. It was also just the sort of concept of, rather than 2 or 3 days of full virtual training, how we could break that up. And so, like everyone, was a combination of Zoom and things like that, but we actually leaned very heavily on Lessonly during that time. I mean, Lessonly was a great go-to-market partner of ours, and we leaned heavily on Lessonly during that time. And now, fast forward 18 months or so from there, and we acquired Lessonly because we just really saw the utility of the platform in terms of both the ease of creation of lessons, training, being able to track what's going on, get people certified, and do that in a in a fun, engaging way, which really complemented our core platform.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. So it's going to sound like you're pitching Lessonly, which you're not, but it's actually been critical to actually empowering your sales team. So what about the getting on Zoom and walking through PowerPoints as training fell flat for your team when you decided that we needed actually to use Lessonly and really lean into it?
Well, it was just both. I mean, when you've prepared, PowerPoint, and even, we prepared a lot of engaging, activities and so forth that we were going to do in person. But when you've prepared a 3-day session from 8 until 5, and you're going to do all of these different exercises, you have to pivot completely. And so a lot of that content, you might, over the course of a day in person mixed up with physical activities, mixed up with, you know, social activities and so forth, you might be able to get through a couple of hundred slides, but obviously you can't do that in a virtual setting. I mean, people fall asleep if you're just clicking through slides. So, you know, again, it wasn't just the use of one product, it was having to rethink the entire way that people are going to pay attention. How do you get engagement, you know, via remote means? How do you keep people motivated? How do you also get the social bonding aspects of things, you know, done in a remote way as well? So it was really good in that it really forced us to think really hard about how we do these things. And, you know, we talked about the first sales kickoff being in person and then having to pivot from there. I mean, we did our last sales kickoff like a lot of people did, you know, fully remotely, you know, not even in any sort of hybrid way. And actually the scores were the highest, you know, we've gotten in terms of engagement of people with, you know, with sales kickoff being virtual. So, you know, I think it's a combination of all these things and making sure you mix it up, because if you spend all day on Zoom or Teams or whatever type of, you know, meeting, it's not just the fact that you're remote. You've got to change the content. You've got to make it different. You've got to keep it engaged. You've got to keep people's motivation high. You've got to make sure you bring in the people who are quieter or more introverted, and it requires also really different you know, facilitation skills and things like that as well.
You know, there's people that are listening to this or that will listen to this that you know, they're not at the scale of Seismic. I mean, you're talking about, you know, a growing sales team. At what point do you think it makes sense to actually invest in something like remote sales learning technology, so that other people can kind of have a sense for when they need to make that investment at their own company?
I mean, when you're thinking about sort of sales enablement maturity, I mean, really we have customers at all sizes and scales, from the biggest customers in the world that have really complex you know, content challenges, as well as you know, readiness challenges and so forth. But we also have you know, small customers that might only have 5 or 10 salespeople, but the challenge is still the same. I mean, there's a war for talent out there. You've got to be able to recruit good talent. You've got to be able to retain them, and you've got to get them to you know, effectiveness quickly, right? And whether you measure that by time to first deal or time to hitting quota or whatever it is, the challenge is the same whether you've got 5 people or 100 people in your sales team. And so we think that it's not too late or not too early at all to invest in something certainly like Lessonly. And then as you move up the maturity journey, for sure, we of course think there's other additions you can do to managing sales enablement. But you know, the fundamentals of needing to onboard, get people time to value quicker, being able to coach them is there. And, you know, notwithstanding, you know, the products that we sell, any products that are helping to improve seller productivity, seller efficiency, and that sort of connectivity in this sort of now at a minimum hybrid world, in the most case virtual world, those are things that are going to stay. You know, McKinsey and others are talking about this was going to happen regardless of COVID or not, this sort of digital sales and marketing transformation. It's just that 2020 was an acceleration of those things, and we've brought forward a transformation a few years.
So for people who might not be familiar with how Lessonly works, take us back to like when you first started using it. I'm assuming, did you purchase it shortly after everyone went remote, or did you already have it as part of the tech stack?
It was already part of our tech stack.
Yeah. So what are there, you know, templates inside of it that help guide sales training? Do you have to build everything offline and then upload it? How would somebody take action with
super easy to build lessons. I mean, I always joke that like I can do it, right? And if I can do something, then anyone, especially who's qualified at building courses and so forth, can certainly do it. But the beauty is that there's a lot of customers that have to do things with a design agency to make it look really professional, or there's a lot of work that goes into taking content and bringing it all together. And like I say, more often than not, that we find that one of the reasons that people love Leslie is because they can do really engaging content themselves, whether it's with video and images and text and things like that. So it's super easy to build courses and keep them up to date and so forth. But it's also good that again, regardless of what tool or anything you're using, you need to make sure, do people like it? Are people using it? Are they engaged with it? And can you prove that it's effective in helping them, ramp faster and sell things as well? So it's not just in the creation, but it's also in the user interface, ease of use, reporting and things like that you get. And I think that applies in anything when people are looking at their tech stack and what they should look at. You want things that are going to be well used, are easy to use, have a really clear value to the user, and we found that with Leslie for sure.
That's terrific. Yeah, especially for salespeople who are averse to using even the tools for their job, like CRMs.
Yeah. I don't want to, I always think that you've got to, you've got internal stakeholders, right? And the whole concept of a CRM system potentially is more about command and control and so forth. And you want CRM's a system of record, and it's useful and serves a good purpose, but you want people to engage with it and be able to do their job in a way that is potentially fun and interesting. So you solve both for both use cases. If you use a CRM as a command and control tool, then you're not up with the times.
So tie a bow on this part of the conversation. How was performance impacted with remote sales learning powering the sales team? I'm assuming there was top line results, there was individual examples of sellers actually becoming more productive and more effective.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, apart from some of the obvious things like our cost efficiency went up, that was partially also because we weren't traveling and doing things like that. But once you get over, let's say, what I call the first, the dark days of COVID, where there was a whole lot of uncertainty and you couldn't get toilet paper and things like that, right? I mean, there was most businesses had a blip, I think, at that in that period of time. After that, I mean, we saw shorter deal cycles. We saw higher average deal sizes, by the way that we'd sort of enabled our sellers. Now, again, I don't put that down. You don't just do that by introducing tools. We changed our processes. We adopted a more value-based approach to selling and so forth. But in conjunction with new tools, certainly made our sellers as effective as possible.
Did you triple revenue or something like that?
Not in the period since COVID, but we've certainly been growing at strong double-digit growth. Yeah,
terrific. So you came on in late 2019, and having spent most of your career at a huge global company, you obviously hired to take Seismic kind of to a whole new level. What was the state of affairs in ops before you came on the scene? And I guess, in other words, what did you uncover in your first 90?
Yeah, it was more probably earlier than the first 90. And I see this in especially with a lot of my peers at other organisations and so forth, was a sales-led organisation that had done really well, but the infrastructure wasn't there. So from a systems point of view, being a tech company, we had a lot of tech, but wasn't necessarily as well integrated as it could be, or everything was automated. The unique challenge being an enablement company, I wanted to make sure that we were best in class at enabling our own sales force, and so that was probably one of the biggest topics, to make sure also that our usage and integration of our own platform at the time, Seismic, and now Seismic and our live social and Leslie and so forth, that all of those things together as a platform were really well used. The other one was data, and I think this is a common challenge for many organizations of a similar stage, is that data and analytics is not necessarily something that's, organized, and, you have a source of truth, and business intelligence tools that are used and so forth. So, my recommendation, also based on what I did at the time 2 years ago, was invest on the data side to really make sure that people know what's going on in the business. People can get the analytics that they need to know what's happening with customers, to know what's happening with their internal business. Because, when you're investing in operations and enablement, you also have to prove the effectiveness of that function. The only way you can do that is by really measuring the things that matter. So, we invested quite heavily in our business intelligence tools, which I certainly recommend to anyone at the same stage as well.
Going back to what you said about technology integration, are you you obviously are referring to your own platform and the suite of products that you offer. Were there other integration issues in your go-to-market tech stack that?
Sorry, my dog. Yeah, my dog's contributing. He may be murdering the FedEx guy at the moment. I don't know.
We can have him join the show if you want.
He would like that, but he'll calm down in a minute, hopefully, when the postman goes away.
That's great. So let's keep rolling. Hey, dogs are part of work these days.
Yeah,
right? So,
that's right. A little bit of an insight into the private life. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So with the tech integration, you said there were some issues with technology integration. Are you referring to across the go-to-market tech stack, like things weren't, the infrastructure wasn't properly built, or just referring to your own platform? No,
not our own platform, just anything in general. And it's where you have point solutions that are put in place. And again, a very common challenge that I see is, and you've got to sit back and do an audit of all the tech that you have. And so many tech software companies buy a lot of tech, right? Because there's also supplier partner type deals going on. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Let's do a bit of this, bit of that, and the evolution of products is so fast, and so it's hard to keep up with what's going on in the market, which is the best solution. And there's so many solutions in general, but I would certainly advocate for a pretty thorough audit. Anyone who's taking a new role in operations should really do a very thorough audit of all the systems that are in place. Should work out which systems really fit the use cases that they need, and rationalize, integrate, and think about everything that you can automate. But you have to do the audit in conjunction with the way you want people to work. If you work for Gong wants you to work, out of Gong. You work for Outreach wants you to work out of Outreach. People want to work out of the CRM. Every organization has a different way that they want to work, and that's okay. So there's no perfect formula for here's how you should do it, and here's the exact perfect tech stack that you should have. But you have to think about what's going to suit your needs, based on the use cases, the way that people use the system, what you need them to do, and then look for all opportunities to rationalize and integrate.
Yeah. What were some of the things you found, some examples specifically of during your audit? You're like, there's overlap here, or this point solution is not being used by anybody. Do you have any examples you can recall?
Yeah, we had multiple sales engagement platforms that were being used in the business. We had. Even this is right when I joined, there was multiple chat programs being used in the company. There was even to that type of thing. So there was some direct overlaps like that. If you have two products that really do essentially the same thing, you need to you should decide and do one. That's fairly obvious. But there are also ways of working that are inefficient. If somebody is looking at data and reports out of one system, someone is looking at data and reports out of another system, and they don't tie together, you cause a whole lot of inefficiency. If somebody's talking about net retention and they're using a figure from over here that doesn't match a figure from over there, you spend a ton of time trying to figure out what's right. So, in addition to the systems, it's more the information you're getting out of the systems that you have to make sure, and that you direct people to either where you want them to go, or you bring things together in a sort of organized way.
The systems really should come later, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. That's my whole point about figuring out what it is you want to do. What do people need to know when they're doing their job? What it is? What are the key things that will make them better at their job, and then figure it out. But so many tech companies are not like that. I mean, tech companies see a tech and they buy it, but don't necessarily work backwards to think about really what problem are they solving.
Why do you think that is, and why do you think that why do you think you had a different viewpoint coming into Seismic than all those other tech companies you just referenced?
Well, I don't think anyone has I don't think I have a particularly different view to most people. I don't know too many people in my position that think that they don't have enough tech. I mean, there's different industries. When I came from working at Siemens Healthineers, and it was more about looking to invest in certain technologies, because there was a very good organized process to make sure that things weren't duplicated or anything like that around the world. But that also meant decision making was very slow at rolling out technology and so forth. Whereas at just pick a theoretical Series C, Series D software company, growing really fast, got lots of money, lots of people that are tech savvy. They see something they like, sort of the shiny object syndrome, and say, we have to have this. It'll solve for this particular. And there's no process that's in place. There's not a procurement department in those sort of companies. There's and there's the decision making might be looser, and so it's easier to put something in place that gives a sort of bit of short-term gratification. But then over time, if you don't focus on making sure it's integrated, making sure that the process that you're really solving for what you thought you were solving for, then you just build up a proliferation of tools.
Wow. Do you think it's incumbent upon senior RevOps people to change those dynamics, to change the way things are purchased without adding too much bureaucracy? And do you think there's a happy medium, I guess that's what I'm saying, from like the old way where there's a procurement system, and then the new way where you just have like end users doing all the research and buying of software?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some great companies that are making an entire business out of that, like Vendor, for example, is offering really value-added services, doing outsourced procurement for software companies, right? And they're able to give expertise in that in that area. Or we've just developed, we've just put in place a procurement department at Seismic, and the procurement person here is great, because I understand what we're trying to do, understand what we're trying to solve for, and there's been no noticeable slowdown in anything. So you've got to do it sort of step by step. But you must that's where I think it's incumbent on RevOps people to own the MarTech stack, let's say, the sales and marketing tech stack at least, because if you don't, and of course you serve those leaders in that regard, but you need to move the organization from people saying we need to deploy this piece of software. You need to move them to a demand management model where they say to you, I need to solve for this problem. Please tell me what software or what process plus software plus enablement plus whatever that we can put in place to solve for that for that need. And that's incumbent upon ops professionals to do that. If the ops team just implements, if you're the CRO and you come to me and say, deploy system XYZ, I had a coffee with the CEO of Marketo, so you should deploy Marketo. And the ops person just says yes. I mean, you're not doing your job. You've got to. Marketo's a great system, by the way. But you've got to do your job and say, do we have something that does the same thing? Is this better? What can I retire? Is it really just deploying a system, or is it actually that our current system that people are not enabled on properly, or what have you? You've got to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So That's such a good point. Does the procurement person report to you? Do they report?
No. So, I mean, procurement in most organisations I've seen reports into finance department, which I think is good as well. As companies mature and grow up, it's good to have a little more financial responsibility as things improve, right? You talk about a lot of companies growing like Seismic are. I mean, a lot have ambitions to do an IPO or things like that, and to do that you've got to have a certain scale and certain set of processes in place. And I mean, I've found that at Seismic has been a great reception to the things that are put in place to help us scale and grow. And so even you put in place processes around certain things. Let's talk about pricing for example. I mean, if you setting pricing policies, setting discount rules, setting things like that can be like a really big topic if you're used to just selling for whatever price and taking every deal at whatever price. But if you do it well, you can grow deal sizes for reps. They get to quota faster. They get more commission and so forth. So there's wins on both sides as long as you don't do it in a authoritarian sort of way. And it's the same with processes around procurement or anything else. If you do it in a way that it helps people do their job, then it's better.
A lot of companies obviously don't have, tech companies, growth stage companies don't have procurement people. So RevOps are the procurement people, or even worse, sales leaders are the procurement people. So how does it work at Seismic? Like for a company that's maturing like you guys, there's sales and marketing leaders, they realize that they need new tech, and then they go through RevOps, and then RevOps goes to procurement. Is that how it flows?
Yeah. I mean, my expectation is also that like people in RevOps are kind of keeping an eye on the market and scanning the market for for new technology as well, right? So I get pitched to a lot, the same as our CRO does, or chief marketing officer, and so forth. But again, if you're not adding anything strategically, if you're just the implementation of technology department, right? But if you're identifying that, hey, look, we don't have anything around intent, or we could fix our quote to cash process and optimize it, and here's some recommendations we have. I mean, that's the type of thing that I always recommend people in ops are doing. So keeping abreast of good technology, but really looking at the business at a flight level that enables them to figure out where they could add value, and then jumping in to do it. And part of the answer is tech, but often it's also process change or other things.
Certainly. All right, so one of the first things you did in the first 90 days was do a big audit. You also mentioned implementing BI and adding more transparency across the business, especially go-to-market. Was that something you did in the first 90 or the next 90?
It was pretty close to the first 90, but it was it was the second 90. So I started in September, and then we launched many of those things at Sales Kickoff, which was like five months after. So
gotcha. Yeah. So where did you see some of the weaknesses in the data? You said there's a little bit of lack of organization. So what did you do to tackle that head on when you came in?
I think the biggest challenge is that it's not that organisations don't have data. It's that it's not organised. It's that it's not in a place that people can find it easily. That it's not in a place where you can self-serve, that you can look up reports and so forth. So the biggest topic for us was deploying a business intelligence tool, and since then we've matured a lot around the architecture and so forth of our data. But you've got to be deliberate with that. You've got to clean the data. I mean, it's super unsexy work to do data deduplication and conventions for how you name your accounts and all this sort of stuff. Super unsexy work, but you have to do it. But the biggest weakness was taking insights out of the data. Like there's a sort of maturity that people go along, and people are happy with certain levels of reporting, but really you've got to figure out, especially as an ops professional that earn their money, are really identifying opportunities for improvement and taking actions with the various leaders based on what the data is telling them. So for us, it was about making it accessible, making it visual, making it usable, and then using that to change whatever outcome we saw was going wrong or whatever.
I think that's a big thing that I interview a lot of ops people on this podcast, and we talk to a lot of them at Scale Matters, and one of the things that we've noticed is that there's such a heavy focus on tech. We just talked about that. We beat that dead horse just the last 20 minutes. And then there's a focus on reporting, right? And so a lot of people, there's a lot of effort and even tech that goes into that, and dashboarding, and for more mature people, BI. But the insights piece is what's still missing. And oftentimes RevOps people are just running around solving problems for other people so much that they can't even get time to put into the insights, and maybe they don't even have the budget to hire an analyst to do the insights work. Talk about why insights are so critical. Let's drill down into that a little bit, and how you guys go from actually just getting good data and then doing the BI thing so you can actually make it easy to find stuff. That's only 2 steps. There's a third step, so talk about that.
Yeah, so finding stuff is exactly right. I mean, look, that's good. If you can't find anything, moving from not finding anything to finding it is a good step. The next thing is you've got to incorporate it. You've got to move from like ad hoc reporting to a rhythm of the business that has data and insights and things built into it, right? So whether that be your forecasting process, your pipeline process, review of your inbound leads, you're reviewing some of the KPIs of your BDR team or something like that. You've got to incorporate data and insights into all of those meetings. I mean, it's a very different discussion if you and I sit down and look at the same dashboard all the time, look at what's working, what's not working, where there's risk in deals, where we could take certain action, whatever the case may be, or if we just sit down and I say, hey, what do you think about this, that, and the other, and we just have a talk for half an hour, and we're not using that. So a big part of it's incorporating it into the regular running cadence of the business. The other part is making it an expectation that the frontline sales leaders are always using data and insights to drive conversations with their teams, and it's doing that sort of triangulation of gut feel and qualitative comments about what's going on together with quantitative insights. It's no good being a RevOps team or a finance team or any team that's just looking at your own dashboards and wondering about what's going on in the business. You've got to incorporate the insights into that regular running operating rhythm of the business and that everybody has to get used to it.
Do you feel, so you just explained, I think you explained that RevOps is the one who should actually own turning the visualizations, for lack of a better word, into actual actionable insights.
Yes.
And then share those with sales leaders to determine next steps. So how is how does the RevOps team at Seismic derive insights? What's the process look like for that, and who's responsible?
Yeah, so I mean, we've invested in a BI tool to create a whole bunch of different reports for different people, whether they be for the marketing team or the sales team or customer success team, whatever the case may be. Now, some of those are things that they might want to look at occasionally, right? That are not part of the regular operating rhythm of the business, and those are more there for informational as they need them and so forth. But the core things that we say, look, it's really important that we do a rigorous review of MQL to sales accepted opportunity, or it's important that we do our out of quarter. We really have a really good view of our out of quarter pipeline, or we need to look at the compliance of customers using our product. Like, are they oversubscribed to licenses, and do we have an opportunity to go back and charge them? Whatever those are some examples of things that for us are critical. we have taken those and incorporated those into a regular process. We've documented the process. We've said this is when we're going to talk about these things, on which day of the month. This is the questions we're going to ask. These are the things we're going to dig in. Now, it's not that RevOps owns that process, right? Each of the business owners needs to own their forecast or their bookings or whatever it is. But producing that playbook, producing the reports and insights is what RevOps needs to do.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Your company, when you guys have executive meetings, do you lead do you kick off the meeting with like state of the business? Here's where we're at. Here are the numbers.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we certainly can get better at that, but the answer is yes, right? Having standard set of reports that you look at, and again, standard agenda, standard way of doing things. Everyone's got to get used to it, and you've got to do that over and over and over again. And then you get to a discussion not about, are these numbers right?
Yeah.
Is this really what's going on? I don't agree. Like, that is garbage. Like, you have to move beyond those type of discussions to basically, here's what it tells us, undisputed version of the truth. Now let's discuss qualitatively what happened and what we're going to do about it. So yes.
What results have you seen by being kind of an insight-led go-to-market engine?
I mean, it's a little bit like we talked about before. I mean, we measure a bunch of key KPIs, about sort of go-to-market efficiency, right? But some of the key ones for us, obviously around growth. But there's things like, win rates. I'll use as an example. I mean, so we locked arms around, specific competitive campaigns a few quarters ago with some specific goals of increasing win rate, and we see that then in the data afterwards, and we did really deep analysis of wins and losses and why and so forth, and that was a very data driven approach. Historically we might not have known, was it really working? It would have been more anecdotal. We wouldn't have been able to tweak exactly what happened. So we're doing now a correlation of what price did we win at, what price was this particular competitor at, and so forth. So that that's a good example that we've seen. But most of our go-to-market metrics around sales and marketing efficiency and deal size and cycle time and deal velocity and so forth are all going in the right direction.
Wow. And culturally, have you seen a shift?
Yeah, I mean, and look, it's interesting because if you come in, we have people come from bigger companies like Salesforce or DocuSign and things like that, and come in and like used to using things like a configuration pricing quotation system, or are used to going through a certain price approval process. Whereas if you're employee number 7 or 8 at Seismic, some of the contracts were done on a napkin or what have you, and so that the evolution is different. But I've seen nothing but people embracing the fact that by doing these things we're going to increase our overall enterprise value, that it's in everyone's best interest to do it, that and I would say that doing some of these things about growing up, as well as taking care of some of the things that really bother your internal stakeholders, like make the approvals process as fast as you can, make really fair commission plans, be really clear on internal SLAs about when things will get done and so forth. If you do those things in conjunction with introducing a bit more process and rigor around things, it works as well.
Okay, the last major thing I wanted to ask you about is M&A. Obviously, Seismic has put multiple companies together. Percolate, Grapevine 6, Lessonly. I don't know if you've done another one since we last talked, Toby, but what's it been like when you're merging two ops teams or multiple ops teams, data models, tech stacks? What are some of the challenges that you faced with that, and how did you solve them?
Yeah, look, it's been super interesting. So some of the companies you mentioned there are different stages of maturity and different sort of levels of harmonious tech stack or not. Now, Lessonly is the largest company out of those three that we're integrating, and we're doing that right. We're doing that right now. Mm-hmm. A few learnings is, you have to integrate ops enablement teams, straight away, because you need everybody to be, stacked hands around what's the pipeline looking like? How are we going to do things with the field? If you've got this cross-sell, joint sell motion, how's it going to work? There's a lot of really tactical things you have to solve for the sales team. So my advice is bring like ops teams together like straight away. You don't want the sales teams to be bothered, and you don't want to change quotas. You don't want to do all these sort of things during a year, but quickly bringing the ops teams together and figuring out what are the processes for some of these really basic things. How do they get deals approved? In which system do we do it, and so forth? And then the long pole in the tent is always the CRM integration. So you've got to work backwards from that. And my general suggestion is as soon as you can get everyone in one CRM system, then you can sort of deprecate the other tools quickly. But you've got to solve for the day-to-day. You've got to make sure that the running business can keep going. So that's been always our focus throughout integrations is sort of do no harm to anything that's running.
What do you think is a reasonable time frame for these things? You said getting the day-to-day stuff, getting the ops people and enabling people talking right away. Is that like day after the announcement goes out? Is that like towards the end of when the deal's coming together? Or do you start that pretty much like before the actual deal's announced? Like what's the timeline of that? And then go ahead.
So look, day one, like people need to know, am I selling something different? Is my pricing different? Is whatever. There's a whole series of day one things. No question. You absolutely cannot go into day one with like salespeople or customer success people or whatever unclear on did their job change or not. And by that, it's also not just did their actual job change, but did they have to follow a different process. So you have to have playbooks for day one. You have to have resources on hand from the ops team. We were having daily sort of office hours with the ops team to make sure if anyone had any questions what to do. And we used our own products, of course, to create a whole lot of content for people, whether that be training content, also resources for people to look at. So you've got to do that all pre-day one and ready to go from day one. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then my follow-up to that is, what's a reasonable timeline for doing you said the CRM, which is the long pole in the tent here. What's a reasonable timeline for that? And you got the tech stack and data model integration, reporting.
Yeah, assuming like a sort of full tech stack. It does realistically take you sort of 9 to 12 months to fully deprecate another CRM system and move off. And that's also driven by contracts that you might have in place with other vendors, and really again, for me, you've got to apply a principle of do no harm, but as quickly as possible agree on this is the way we're doing it and move people into it. But 9 to 12 months is typically the last things to happen, which is turning off the CRM system and so forth.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question for you, Toby. I want you to describe the perfect ops team for a modern go-to-market engine. I think it's good for younger companies to hear how they should be building it out.
I think the perfect RevOps team definitely covers all the go-to-market functions, the revenue function. So, marketing operations, sales operations, customer success operations. I think then there should be an enablement team. Of course, I would say that, working from an enablement company, working across the go-to-market engine, and a data and analytics team. So, you've got the sort of marketing, sales, and customer success teams that take care of process, tools, and so forth. But you've got a team that brings it all together from an enablement perspective, and you've got a team that ties it all together to make sure that the systems and the data is integrated.
Mm-hmm. Is there a RevOps headcount that should be growing proportionally to the sales headcount? Is there a way you think about that?
So I've seen different ratios ranging from anywhere between 1 to 5 to 1 to 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that depends a lot on the functions that are included. But I think if you include enablement resources, and if you're really a fast-growing company that's got a lot of need for productivity and efficiency and so forth, you can get a lot of scale with a sort of 1 to 10 ratio. You can get a lot of value, but it does depend a little bit on the starting point.
Yeah. And then who should ops roll up to? I mean, different companies do it differently. Some roll up to the CRO, some to the CEO, some CFO. What's your view on that?
So when I joined Seismic, I was rolling up to the CRO. I now roll up to the CEO because we've expanded ops sort of, really across the company. I don't think it matters as long as you have a very clear mandate on, what it is that you're going to do. I mean, I always supported the chief marketing officer, head of customer success, CEO, like a number of internal stakeholders. So, my view is that RevOps has got to be as sort of independent as possible, but it doesn't mean that they can't roll up to, a CRO or wherever, as long as they have a clear mandate and charter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, hey, Toby, we covered a lot of ground in the last 45 minutes. I really appreciate you coming on Go-to-Market Excellence. Best of luck with Seismic, and obviously dreams for a massive exit or IPO for you guys. So it sounds like you're well on your way. Keep up the awesome work, and hope to catch up with you down the road.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Thank you.